Should I eat it or not? My head tells me not to. My heart tells me to go for it. How do I know what to do? Today, on ToK Today, we'll explore how two apparently different types of knowledge interact. Welcome to ToK Today. Please feel free to hit like and subscribe if either both reason and your emotions motivate you to do so. ToK students often view reason and emotion as being oppositional forces of knowledge. Of course, research by a number of psychologists, including Damasio, show that reason and emotion are both mutually inclusive processes in both decision-making and in the wider sense of understanding the world. Most apparently rational decisions can be seen as just a set of perceived choices, which are shaped by an emotionally experienced endpoint. So if emotion shapes reason and vice versa, reason shapes emotion, the possible consequences for decision making and the knowledge used to make decisions are significant. Consider, for example, decision-making in an emergency situation, such as a natural or human disaster. Decision-making in potentially risky contexts, such as substance use or interpersonal behaviours. Decision-making in policy-setting contexts, such as military intervention or do we spend more money on welfare? To understand the types of knowledge involved and how that interacts, let's start by looking at what we mean by emotion. So to look at the relationship between emotion and reason, it's useful to be able to explain emotion both in structure, form and function. I really like the first few chapters of Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, for explaining why and how emotions are developed and how they're structured. Essentially, Goleman argues that emotions predate the development of modern sensory systems like sight and hearing and touch. As such, they constitute our pre-sensorial understanding of the world. They're old, they're stuck back there in the limbic system. And Goleman explains that the word emotion comes from the Latin word motus, meaning to move. So before the development of modern senses, the stimulation of the limbic system would have made the organism move. That's to move away from danger and towards food, towards protection, towards the opportunity to reproduce, and so on and so on. As such, ToK students, comparing emotion and reason, have a way of showing the interrelationship between various areas of knowledge and forms of knowledge. If you take a neuroevolutionary approach, you can describe how various lobes of the cerebellum develop as a mutually inclusive process of the development of the various organs of sensory perception. Roughly the occipital lobe developed as there was increased need to process data from the eyes. The parietal lobe developed to deal with the process of taste and skin pressure, and the temporal lobe developed for speech and smell, so on. The emphasis here is on the interpolation of the senses, and most importantly, that sensory perception is built upon emotion as a form of knowledge. Sensory perception is built upon emotion. Now, this realization then leaves us open for a wonderfully interesting discussion about the relative strengths of different forms of knowledge in understanding decision making. A rather cliched example that I pose for my students is the decision about whom to date or to marry. Is this best made using reason or emotion? Of course, the answer to that question is culturally specific. Do we marry the person we love, or do we grow to love the person we marry, or not marry at all? And this can easily be seen as a reason versus emotion debate, because it could be developed to a more sophisticated discussion around the cultural influences on cognitively and biologically based experiences, which leads us to the issue of neuroplasticity. If you don't know what neuroplasticity is, then Google it, read about it. It's really amazing. Recent findings on neuroplasticity turn the whole emotion, reason, perception, so on and so on, debate, upside down and inside out. If you're yet to hear about or understand the process of neuroplasticity, click here for a far better explanation than I can give. Lutz et al. In 2005 showed that regular meditation causes structural changes in the brain, and it improves functioning and increases the number of amygdala connections. A psychological researcher called Maguire in 2006 found that London taxi drivers had a far more developed posterior hippocampi in comparison to non-taxi drivers. Now, both pieces of research used fMRI to investigate the brains of their subjects. fMRI is interesting for ToK because it's starting to break down that idea that there's a separation between what we think and what happens in our brains. Okay? Both pieces of research have found that the environment has a major influence on the structures which mediate emotion and reason. So as such, the research seems to suggest that rather than treating emotion and reason as separate types of knowledge, we could look at them as being mutually integrated forms of knowledge, and that they're both heavily influenced by the environment. Now, let's go back to AOK natural sciences and the biological basis of emotion, so often described in the theories of emotion. In 1995, a psychologist called Wedekind showed that romantic attraction has a genetic basis in the major histocompatibility gene combination that a person carries round. So again, the research shows an integration of emotion and reason as forms of knowledge. However, in this case, the reason can be seen as an internal biological process of reasoning. This is similar to natural selection. Further research from a range of researchers suggests that hormone oxytocin is the basis for bonding, attraction, and love. And if we can understand an emotional experience, such as love, as a biological process, is it appropriate or correct to separate reason and emotion as forms of knowledge? Does not one subsume the other? Which subsumes which becomes the crucial question for ToK. Now, it could be argued that scientific biological knowledge is based upon reason, establishing cause and effect, doing tests using experimental processes and the hypothetical deductive process and all of that. But it could also be argued that the motivation to establish that knowledge in the first place is in itself based upon emotions. The emotions in question here could be those associated with status, context, tradition, survival, self-fulfillment, and so on and so on. The more we look at why humans seek to find things out, the harder it becomes to dismiss the dominant role of human emotions in forming reason-based knowledge. Now, for students who want to extend their depth of analysis of this, you can look at the role of cognitive bias in disrupting emotions and therefore disrupting reason or logic. This is a debate that can go on and on and on, but I make this video because I sort of grow a bit tired of students presenting reason and emotion as being separate or competing forms of knowledge. If you're preparing your ToK exhibition or you're deciding which ToK exhibition prompt to use, then be sure to check out our range of ToK exhibition ebooks. ToK Exhibition Prompts Explained, and they give you step-by-step ways of developing knowledge arguments to get those high marks for each ToK exhibition prompt, and they give you examples of objects that you could use, and so on and so on. Now you can pick up the ebooks of all the prompts explained, or just 5 of the prompts explained, or just an individual prompt explained, whichever suits you best. Thank you so much for watching. Stay ToKtastic, my friends. Bye.